This segment considers the core aspects of the social construction of target populations framework. It does so by focusing first on the process by which change can occur, but more importantly, it spends the bulk of our time defining and applying the 5 propositions that make up the core of this framework. This figure provides an overview of the core aspects in the social construction and policy design framework. Schneider and Ingram asserted and found that past and current policy designs have not just material impacts on target populations, but also interpretive effects that affect the policy-making dynamics and institutions that implement policy, as well as the culture at large. Thus, there is a feed-forward effect in which all of these factors influence future policy design, with target populations and the definitions assigned by culture at large serving as critical elements of this policy design. While decomposing the elements is important to understanding how social constructions are created and influence our narrative, as well as the tangible survival world we live in, understanding that this is a process can help us make changes when they are needed. The first proposition concerns allocation. Defined concisely, Proposition 1 considers the allocation of benefits and burdens to target groups by public policy. This allocation in turn depends on the extent of the political power of target population groups and how they are perceived by the general public, or at least the policy public, in either positive or negative terms. It is easy to think of social constructions and power dynamics in matrix structure. However, Schneider and Ingram evolved their framework to see the matrix in terms of dimensions of power. Target populations can be seen as divided into 4 main groups. However, it is better seen that they are classified according to their level of political power and their social construction or deservedness as viewed by society. This in turn is taken into account by policymakers when allocating benefits and other burdens, although the actual constructions may vary based upon the political figures and parties doing the actual construction. With both these figures, we consider what are the predicted social constructions according to Ann Schneider, Helen Ingram, and Peter DeLeon, and the measured social constructions as calculated by Mechanical Turk's sample of over 1,500 workers and a study by Kreitzer and Smith. The advantage found in the upper left part of the matrix are those that are both having high power and being viewed as deserving. Examples of this group, in theory, include small business owners, homeowners, the military, and scientists. When ranked, it included military, police, and job creators. These groups are the ones that tend to be perceived with respect and receive benefits from public policy that allow them to have greater control over their destiny, as well as less scrutiny. Contenders are those groups that have high power but are not viewed as positively and, as a result, are not seen as deserving. Theoretical and empirically tested examples of this group include big business, Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and the pharmaceutical industry. Individuals from this group often receive benefits from public policies that are made, although these benefits are disguised as punishment, or when punishment does occur, is largely symbolic. As a result, there is quiescence from the population at large due to the perceived sanctions being received. Dependents are those individuals who have low political power but are constructed in a positive social manner and are thus viewed as deserving as need of help. In other words, they are portrayed as victims of the system. Examples of dependent groups include families in poverty, children, and those with mental health issues. These individuals in the groups here are often subject of much political rhetoric but receive little in terms of actual benefits that they are allowed to have control over. Finally, there are the deviants. Deviants have little political power, are socially perceived in a negative manner, and thus are viewed as undeserving by society. Examples of this group include terrorists, criminals, welfare cheats, and sex offenders. These individuals receive very little in benefits from government and are often faced with sanctions or other burdens. The second proposition, concerning feed-forward, argues that policy designs have both material and symbolic effects on target populations. In other words, social constructions have reputational, interpretive, and, importantly for the populations that need policy supports to survive, tangible effects that impact that group's attitudes and political participation. The effects of these social constructions of that targeted population can be seen as occurring through a structuring of opportunities for the members of the group focus on the things that shape their life experiences and give them subtle messages about how government works and how they are likely to be treated by the political system. Policy design can affect participation by specific target populations in many different ways that range from the subtle to the overt and obvious. The messages conveyed to individuals through policy design can have subtle and long-lasting effects as the information received and processed is internalized by individuals of that pertinent group and then may affect their willingness to engage with the political system, and if they do, their resultant behavior. The more obvious and overt impacts can be the availability of resources to deliver and implement policies. In other words, the money and time available affects the experiences of target populations with the policy that is applied to them, and this, in turn, can influence their later political participation. In summary, policies have long-reaching effects on the politics of multiple issues and on political behavior that goes well beyond the policy being implemented. Proposition 3 addresses the root cause of social constructions by considering why and how humans use them. The authors argue that social constructions emerge from intuitive, often preconscious reactions, and then are justified with selective attention to evidence. In other words, humans have distinct biases in how we make decisions, and because of this, we use simple heuristics to process information. Some examples include fast thinking, where the brain draws on subconscious scripts before making decisions; the availability heuristic, which is a decision-making shortcut in which judgments are made on the basis of things that are more easily coming to mind or being more easily imagined; and confirmation bias, which is the tendency to pay attention mainly to the evidence that supports previously held beliefs. Additional heuristics that may be considered include anchoring, where establishing the starting point affects subsequent decisions; the affect heuristic, in which emotional responses play a role in processing information; the halo effect, that occurs when one good attribute influences the processing of all other attributes, as well as a range of other decision-making and information processing biases that are being studied by political scientists and psychologists extensively. Another way to view Proposition 3 is to think of it as concerning moral predispositions first, and more thoroughly, some might say rational thought later. Policy shapers respond to and exploit these biases in judgments and decisions in their policy rationales and their selections of strategies as they play the role of moral entrepreneurs. In short, moral entrepreneurs translate the social anxieties and negative perceptions of marginal groups into legislative crusades. Whether there is truly a threat from these socially constructed groups, or if this is solely a theoretical construction of a threat, is often a major part of contested politics. Telling the stories regarding the causal link between social constructions of deviant groups and policy design relies upon 3 distinct propositions. The first is that there must be at least one socially marginal group that possesses a value-laden stereotype. From there, public attention must be focused on that group, with emotion most often being that of fear. From there, political profit can be made from placing the issue with the group that is socially constructed in a fear-inducing manner on the public agenda. When we think about the fourth proposition, that of changing social constructions, we must first begin with the principle that social constructions are inherently resistant to change. As discussed before, there are emotional and automatic linkages to social constructions in our brains. Additionally, as outlined in Proposition 2, past policies can dampen participation and mobilization. However, changes can and will occur. Scientific authority can play an important role in facilitating changes in social constructions by introducing new and nuanced information that changes willing minds. Additionally, policy design can facilitate change in social constructions by providing focus, resources, arenas, and prompt mobilization of political actors in such a manner that convinces both the actors and the bystanders to change their minds. When we consider Proposition 5 in detail, social construction of target population sees that policy change is rare due to there being path dependencies. In other words, there's continuing support for providing benefits to the advantaged and punishment for the deviants that meets with continued public approval. In this situation, due to their political power, both the advantaged and the contenders can resist change. In short, imposing burdens on an advantaged group promotes counter-mobilization and resistance and has diminishing marginal returns for policymakers. At the same time, we see that punitive policies against deviants has staying power because there is no real power from these groups to challenge these policies, and they typically cannot mobilize public sympathy. Finally, while policies may eventually end, it often is long after the policy stops producing effective results.